Hello and welcome to another segment of Interviews That Matter. I'm your host Raj Mehta. Friends, in this segment we bring those guests who influence our lives. This includes elected officials, policymakers, heads of major organizations and other dignitaries. It is my sincere hope that the knowledge brought in by these guests will help our community. Today we have such guest, Senator Jack Martins. Jack Martins is running for re-election for the third term in the New York State Senate from the 7th District. Let's meet Senator Martins. Senator, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming again this year.
I appreciate it.
We had you here before in our show, and thank you so much for coming again.
My pleasure to be here, as always. I look forward to these opportunities to catch up, so thank you.
No problem, sir. Let's first begin with the refreshing viewers' memory about yourself. You're almost finishing second term.
Almost finishing my second term in the state Senate, representing the 7th Senate District,
right?
Which
comprises of?
Well, it starts at the city line and it goes out to Hicksville, and it goes from Elmont north to the Long Island Sound. It includes Great Neck, Port Washington, Manhasset, Roslyn, Mineola, Hicksville, Westbury, Garden City Park, New Hyde Park, Floral Park, Stewart Manor, Elmont.
Oh, wow.
We missed a few between Williston Park, Albertson, and Carl Place, but there are many communities in the 7th Senate District. 320,000 residents, and it has been a tremendous honor to be able to represent them in the state Senate.
Very good, very good. And before the Senate, you were a mayor of Mineola?
Before going to the Senate, I was the mayor of Mineola for 4 terms. We were there for 8 years.
8 years, wow.
Which was, again, a tremendous experience. You know, very few people have the opportunity to be mayor of the community where they grew up.
Right.
And so, having grown up in Mineola, having grown up with my friends and colleagues, and then continued to start a family and raise a family in Mineola with so many of my friends and colleagues and their families, it is always very interesting, not only to be part of that dynamic and part of that discussion, but to be elected to elected office is pretty neat.
How did you start with this? I mean, how did you think about going to run for a mayor or do something?
Well, public service, I think, is a calling for many people. Sometimes it starts with somebody just asking a basic question. Why? Why do things happen this way?
Right.
Or questioning decisions that are being made and how it impacts our families and how it impacts our friends and our community. You're pushed to public service sometimes by wanting to try and make a difference. And so I would like to think that in my public service, whether it's at the local level or whether it's at the state level, that we've been able to do that as well.
So public service was basically you wanted to make some change into your communities or things like that. That's how you started.
Well, and that's really where it was. For me in Mineola, it was financial. It was the course that the village had taken, decisions that had been made with respect to borrowing in the village. The financial condition of the village had gotten to a certain state where I thought that something needed to be done. We're a village of 20,000 residents. We have a tax base at the time of about $11 million, and the village had $33 million in debt, which is significant, obviously.
Yeah.
And so a lot of projects were built during that period, but they were all built at the same time. And the tax consequences and the impacts of those projects having been built were sitting out there. So the village had a negative fund balance, had a tremendous amount of debt. The day I took office, we had a negative $500,000 fund balance.
Oh wow!
There was $33 million in debt. $20 million were in bond anticipation notes, so they hadn't even been converted to bonds yet.
Oh.
And we had to go to Moody's and ask them to underwrite the bonds.
Wow.
So that was my first, dose of trying to address the circumstances. We did. We were able to convert those bond anticipation notes to bonds. We got the lowest interest rate for a long-term bond that the village had had in its history because we came in with a debt service plan and we were able to explain to Moody's what we were going to do. And 8 years later, when I was elected to the Senate, the village had reduced its debt from $33 million to less than $20 million. We had
paid off.
We had paid off debt. We had gone 8 years not relying on debt to pay or to make ends meet. We had gotten into the habit of providing for multiple year financials so that we could test recurring revenues against recurring expenditures, so we knew where we were. We had accumulated a fund balance as well along the way, so that we had marshaled the taxpayers' money appropriately. And the village is in wonderful shape now. They had credit upgrades along the way. So it is, again, called public office more often than not is because people want to try and make a difference. And sometimes it's really a question of how decisions have impacted the community, how decisions have impacted your own family, and your opportunity to hopefully make a positive change.
So most of the people, like they're busy in working and coming home and doing whatever, family time, and then go home and sleep.
Well, that's the reality.
You got to have it inside you, really, right? I mean, how can you keep track of all these things?
Well, look, we all work. We all also have to make sacrifices in our lives.
Right.
I'm an attorney by profession, as you know. I practice law. That is how I have, historically, that's how I supported my family. Through my practice. I am, now a state legislator. So yes, I'm able to partially support or help support my family with that, but that's a part-time job as well. And so I do have a full-time job. You have to make those kinds of sacrifices, and there are things worth sacrificing for.
Right.
I was taught early from my dad that if you're going to complain about something, you better be willing to do something about it.
Perfect.
And so the opportunity for somebody to say, I think that we're heading in the wrong direction, or I believe strongly that we should be doing something in a certain way, also requires that we go out there and do something about it. You can't realistically oppose something or be concerned about government action and then sit on the sidelines and lament the fact that it happened. You can't complain without taking action. And I think that's an important part of it as well.
Right, yeah. And like most of the time it happens like discussions and discussions and discussions, and nothing happens at the end of the day. So well, that's why, that's what you're saying, that you got to do something. You got to take action.
Right. Well, you can't ignore it. Things don't get better by themselves.
Right.
Just leaving it alone doesn't mean it's going to go away or it's going to change. You need to get involved. And if you don't, and you're waiting for someone else to, well, they're waiting for you as well.
Right.
So I've never had it in my nature to wait, and oftentimes I find that I'm more than willing to extend myself in order to try and address some of those things.
Who was your mentor? Who did you think that, who did you learn from, and how did you, see, like the being a mayor, like you obviously restructured your finances, right, first thing.
Sure.
And obviously you're an attorney, you said that. So somebody has to be able to help you in restructuring these finances.
Well, Raj, we have so many mentors in our lives. If we go back and look at it, so many people who have influenced us over time. I would start with my parents first and foremost,
right.
in having set the priorities for us growing up. Being able to make distinctions between right and wrong, the importance of integrity, the importance, and I'm sure you feel very much the same way. God gave us one name. It's our job to protect it, and you don't get a second chance. So making decisions and making honorable decisions are important. Those are things that are instilled in you at an early age, and then as you go through your formative years, and you go on to a university, or you go on to college, and you go on to postgraduate work, in my case, law school. You look at professors, and you look at for me it was attorneys in the community who were exceptional attorneys, and people who not only were great attorneys in the profession, but were also great community members, and had a sense of giving back and public service as well. that's also an important part of what we do. And then you get into public service, and you have great examples of great public servants, great leaders who've had the courage to take circumstances that perhaps weren't the best and to turn them into something that was positive. You can talk about great presidents that we've had. We can talk about great leaders that we've had here locally. But courageous people who've wanted to make a difference. And you look at them and you say, I want to be like them. Isn't that what we do as human beings?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we should be doing also. Right. I agree with you. So, from mayor to senator, right? The first time you ran, obviously, there was a window of opportunity open probably for you. Is that how it happened?
There was, for the Senate.
For the Senate.
There was. Frankly, I decided that I was concerned about what was happening in New York State at the time, and you almost have to go back 4 years to remember those years. Elliot Spitzer had been caught in that scandal. He had resigned. David Patterson had been elevated to governor. There was dysfunction in the legislature. There was infighting. They couldn't pass a budget. The economy was falling apart. Taxes were increased. They were passing new taxes like the MTA payroll tax. They were increasing taxes in fees. They were cutting service on the Long Island Railroad. They were cutting aid to our school districts. Again, putting more of a burden on our local property taxpayers. Those were very difficult times. And to our points earlier, it's those times that are challenging.
Right.
As a mayor and as a locally elected official, I'm looking and I said, this can't be. This isn't New York State. This isn't the Empire State. And worse, this isn't the place where I feel comfortable raising my family. We're all motivated by the same things. We're all motivated not only by the ability to provide currently for our families and make sure that they have a safe place to grow up with great schools, with great opportunities, but we all want our kids to come home. And we want to make sure that they can afford to come home. We want to make sure that they can afford to come back. And we want to make sure that this is going to be a place that is attractive to our kids when they do decide whether they go to college or whether they decide to seek a career path. We want to make sure that they have a place to stay. New York at that point, back in 2010, wasn't that place. I do believe that during these last 4 years, we've done some pretty significant things, bringing New York State, putting it back on the right track, not only financially back on the right track, taking a $10 billion deficit and paying it off and having a surplus within 4 years, not increasing a single tax or fee in 4 years, and yet being able to turn around just simply by reprioritizing spending. A lot of the same issues that I dealt with as a mayor on a smaller level, I was able to participate in on a much larger level as a member of the legislature as we tackled the issues between 2010 and today. And today New York State is in a much better position than it was in 2010, and I would probably argue that New York State is in a much better position than it's probably been in a few decades as far as a government that is able to function. It's able to work across the aisle to get things done. You have, we've talked about 4 on-time budgets. And if people say, well, big deal. Well, do you know when the last time we had 4 consecutive on-time budgets was in New York State?
Probably
the late 1960s.
Wow, 1960s.
60s. And so when you consider that, things that sometimes we take for granted, it's been decades. But if we can't do the simple things right, if we can't do what's supposed to be the easy things right, how are we supposed to tackle the tough stuff? How are we supposed to create those transformative projects that are going to provide a better future for our children if we're too busy fighting over the mundane stuff that we should be able to get out of the way almost as a matter of course?
It takes a leadership actually, right? I mean, really, like for example, before, the Republican Senate versus Assembly, Democratic Assembly, they were like never syncing to each other, but now there is a mindset actually, and that comes from the leadership top down, right?
Well, I think it does. I think it is extraordinary that when you did have a Democrat Senate and a Democrat Assembly, they actually didn't get along even more so because they were too busy fighting with each other, and they were too busy fighting with a Democrat governor in David Patterson. But I will, to your point, I will give a tremendous amount of credit to Governor Cuomo. I do think that although the governor and I don't always agree on everything, but I do, nor should we, by the way.
Right.
Nor should we.
Right. Exactly.
But I do think that he has set the right tone. That he has shown the willingness to work across the aisle and to actually put the politics aside and to focus on governing. We run under certain labels. I run as a Republican because I believe strongly in the Republican principles.
Right.
Now, Raj, ask me what those Republican principles are, and we can discuss that.
Absolutely.
But a Republican from New York is not a Republican from Texas. But a Democrat from Nassau County is also not a Democrat from New York City.
Right.
And so we have to consider that when we run on certain political platforms. But when we govern for the same constituency, and those politics have to take a back seat to us doing the right thing.
Yeah, basically, Republican principles are entrepreneurship and risk-taking.
Well, it's entrepreneurship, it's risk-taking, it's great schools and protecting the schools, it's cutting taxes, it's providing opportunities for small business owners, it's trying to take away the red tape and government interference and bureaucracy so that people have an opportunity to succeed and thrive. I ask people all the time. I now chair, as of earlier this year, I chair the Small Business Economic Development and Commerce Committee in the New York State Senate.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
So I ask small businesses, I ask them all the time. I said, if there was one thing you can change in New York State, what would you change? And they said, just allow us to do what we do without government interference. Allow us the opportunity to work hard and to have the benefits of our risk that we're willing to take. We'll take the risk. We're willing to work and we'll work hard.
Right.
But then don't penalize us for working hard.
Right, which is taxes.
Which is taxes.
Yeah.
Which is taxes.
Yep.
And so I embrace and I admire people who are successful. We should. That's always been our society. We've always been an aspirational society where we look at people who are successful and we tell our children, if we're not able to get there, at least we know that our children one day will have the opportunity to go where we weren't able to go.
Right.
That's been the basis of the American dream, hasn't it?
100% agree with you. Totally agree with you. Yeah. Now, in first term of your Senate, obviously, you went from 20,000 people, 320,000 people. Right? There's a huge difference. First time you went to Senate, you may have to learn a lot, like as a junior senator or whatever you call it.
I will tell you this.
So
the
how was the reception?
Well, the reception has been great. It really has been.
Yeah.
The learning curve has been. It was pretty easy, to be frank with you. Having come from public office and understanding government, it was very. The transition was pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We have been, and I think that's why, frankly, we've been very successful in our efforts. We have passed more bills during these last 4 years than anyone else on Long Island, in the Assembly or in the State Senate. My first 4 years in the New York State Senate, we've passed more bills than anyone else. And that means not only bills that have passed in the Senate, but the same bills with corresponding in the Assembly that have been signed into law by the governor. There's no one else on the island who has as much as we have. So yes, we hit the ground running, but I think part of that also is that I understand that I don't know it all. Okay, that part of my responsibility as a government official is to listen, and I think that's also probably for some people the hardest thing is to actually listen. I have my views, but I also have to understand that in order for me to reach common ground with others, that I have to listen to their views as well.
Yep.
And so being able to craft legislation that address my concerns, but also have an opportunity to address that other person's concerns.
Good. Yeah, I think that's important, very important, to listen, really.
We don't know everything, and as we often say, Raj, you remember me saying this before, the great tragedy of the world is that we don't know what we don't know. And so we shouldn't assume that we know it all.
Right, exactly, I agree. Yep. Before we go on to the current race, this November, I want to talk to you about, can you describe us like what are your major accomplishments in the Senate in last 4 years?
Sure, of course. Passing legislation, significant accomplishment. The specific types of legislation, we were able to pass legislation this year that affected our veterans. Homeless veterans is a huge issue anywhere you look, and it really is one of the shame of our society. We have men and women who have fought overseas, they've volunteered, they've gone off and they come home, there are no jobs waiting for them, very little opportunities, and society needs to do a better job at providing for them. 17% of our homeless population are veterans. And so we passed a bill that the governor has signed into law that will allow for a checkoff on the income tax returns with money set aside to help protect and also provide housing, food, and the like for veterans who are homeless. Put them on the path and hopefully give them opportunities that they don't already have.
Wow.
The second bill I'll talk to you about is one that the governor just signed literally this past week. It's the trust bill, trust, T-R-U-S-S. It was the significant bill for our fire services, our volunteer fire services. It has to do with construction of buildings and the types of materials they use. And there are some materials that they use in construction that are you laminate based. They might call them micro lams or trusses. They're used as beams in construction, but there's a significant portion of it that is glue, and under high heat they come undone and they collapse.
Right.
So not knowing what type of construction materials they have, our emergency responders respond to an emergency, to a fire. They send people into the fire, not realizing that the type of construction that's there is susceptible to breaking down in high heat.
High heat, right.
And there have been instances where the buildings collapse, killing emergency responders. Well, we were able to pass a bill, Assemblywoman Schimmel in the Assembly, myself in the Senate, and the governor signed it last week, which will require when there is truss construction that they have to put an indicator, let's say, outside on the building, which firefighters in responding to that building will look for to determine how they should address the fire.
Right.
So, my efforts, certainly over the last 4 years, I chair the local governments committee as well, being a former mayor. So, working with local governments, working with our fire departments, our school districts, and with our fire districts and water districts, we've passed legislation not only to help them, but we've also moved the agenda as far as support for them. So we've gotten record amounts of aid for our school districts. Again, the more money we're able to get from Albany to our local school districts, the better off they're going to be in terms of being able to keep property taxes down.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a remarkable 4 years, working hand in hand with many of my colleagues, but most importantly, working hand in hand with our communities here in Nassau County.
Okay, so what are the issues that you think which are important to our community these days?
Well, the biggest issue is one, jobs,
Right.
taxes,
Right.
schools, things like Common Core, and their effect on our ability to educate our children. We're also dealing with, in a very significant way, a spike in addiction and overdose deaths from opiates and heroin.
Wow.
that we really need to come to terms with. And if you had to ask, if I had to say, those four and issues are remarkable. How do we deal with property taxes, and how do we address property taxes going forward?
Right.
4 years ago we passed a property tax cap at 2%.
Right.
That has made a remarkable difference. And if we understand that between 2003 and 2011, property taxes doubled. Okay. So if the taxes doubled, they were increasing at an average rate of about 7 or 8% per year. They doubled in 8 years. That tax cap was the opportunity to say, slow down, stop. If there's one complaint that we hear time and again is that people are being taxed out of their homes, and many, especially senior citizens on fixed incomes, are concerned that they may not be able to continue to live here because they can't afford those taxes.
Right.
So, as a collective, we were able to pass a property tax cap that at least slowed down the increase to a point that we hadn't seen in literally 8 years. When property taxes double, you know it's time to stop,
Right.
and we've done that. Jobs and opportunities and economic development. We're still coming out of this crisis, even though it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to reinvest in local communities. I sit as a member of the Regional Economic Development Council here on Long Island. And so, I'm happy to say we brought over $250 million in investments to Long Island companies, to Long Island municipalities, to many of our universities, in terms of infrastructure grants, research grants, or even economic development grants that are stimulating the economy, created thousands of jobs with targeted grants that have made a difference. So not only are we investing in small companies or larger companies, encouraging them to stay here and incentivizing them to relocate here, we're also putting money into research and development, which will hopefully create that next generation or that next Microsoft, the next large company that is going to employ thousands of people and employ them right here on Long Island, which I think is also extraordinarily important.
What is your vision? Like, for example, like what do you think that 5 years from now that we should be doing now, which is going to help in next 5 years, 10 years?
But we have to,
which will help the community, which will bring more economic development.
We have to focus on the STEM areas of education, science, technology, engineering, and math. We've seen time and again that those are the areas that are innovation centers. Right. That's where the economy is going. If we want to create high-paying, long-term jobs and to create incubators for small businesses that'll be large businesses and employ thousands of people here on the island, we have to invest in those types of education and give opportunities. When we look at it, take a step back. Long Island is extraordinarily well-educated, extraordinarily. If it were its own state, it would be the most educated state in the country, with more Intel winners on any number of factors. New York notwithstanding, Long Island would stand as #1 in education across the board. So we have a very well-educated workforce. Right. We also educate our children. Right. But the realities are our children are leaving, and more often than not, they're not coming home. So we have to create the opportunities here on Long Island for them to get good jobs. Right. We have to create opportunities here for them to live here on the island. What we find now is that so many of our next generation aren't looking to live on 50 by 100 or 60 by 100 lots. Right. They want to live in a different setting, and more of an urban setting, maybe in apartments or condos. Right. They want to live in a downtown. They want to live close to a transit hub. They want to have activity around them. And so you see many of our children going elsewhere. Some of them going back into the city, sort of a reverse migration to what happened 50, 60 years ago when they came from the city out to the suburbs. Now they're going back. But I think the challenge is we need to create those opportunities in those downtowns right here in Nassau County. So whether you're looking at areas like Mineola or Great Neck or Port Washington, beautiful downtowns that are there, they're available, and should be attractive to anyone. We have to create spaces here so that our children can come back, afford to live here, again, because not everybody can afford to buy that home, even that starter home. Give them the opportunity where they can come back, stay in the community, find good paying jobs in the community. And that takes a concerted effort. It just doesn't happen by accident. We have to work on downtown revitalization efforts. So you see them working right now. If you look in Westbury, if you look in Mineola, you see wonderful examples of downtown revitalization efforts. Further out on the island, you see great efforts out in Patchogue with Paul Pontieri. You see efforts taking place now in areas like Ronkonkoma, around the train station, or even the village of Hempstead with Renaissance and with Don Monte. There are great things happening, but again, through a concerted effort to try and move that along. you're also going to see, through Startup New York, through these incubators, a state initiative to invest in communities in a way that says we're going to partner with our universities. So whether it's Stony Brook out in Suffolk County, whether it's Farmingdale here, or even Hofstra University or others, those happen to be the ones that have gotten involved so far, we're going to create space so that we can encourage small businesses either to relocate from out of state or to be formed here in New York State to create new, innovative jobs. We're going to give them the incentive to do that by not allowing or not requiring that they pay taxes. And so in doing that, we're going to encourage them to locate here, create the jobs here, create the economic activity here, which will form the basis, hopefully, for the next 100 years.
So this Startup New York is basically connected to a university or colleges, and that's how, I mean, if somebody, let's say someone wants to relocate into that area, how do they find it?
Well, they work through the Empire State Development Corporation, which is the economic development arm of the state of New York. And Startup New York specifically involves partnering with local universities. So you use your university campuses, your education centers as the basis for creating those incubators that'll create those next generation of businesses and jobs. So I think there's a natural synergy between the universities and providing them with an opportunity for them to take the ideas and the innovations that they learn in the universities and applying them. So far too often, let's look at Stony Brook, for example, a wonderful university with a wide array of degrees, but they're phenomenal in the sciences. And we have so many bright, brilliant minds at Stony Brook. How great would it be if we were able to have a Startup New York Center right by Stony Brook, so that one of their students, perhaps somebody who's there as a student, can develop the next new app, the next new process, whether it's on the internet, whether it's in the form of a new program. They're doing it. They may not have the wherewithal to start a new business. They may not have the knowledge, and they may be intimidated by the financial aspects of starting a new business. Having a group that's able to create an incubator for them so that they would help them along, allow them to get started, and then transition, hopefully at some point, into the community where they can continue to grow, I think is extraordinary. And so for a large portion of our history here in Nassau County, things grew organically. Companies came, they started, they were successful, and they created those jobs. But when those companies left, like Grumman, that employed tens of thousands of people, everyone just assumed that someone else would come in and fill the void. Well, things don't happen just like that. You have to make them happen. You have to go out there and create conditions that'll allow them to happen. And so we'll probably never see another Grumman, but that doesn't mean that we won't see another employer, whether it's technology or otherwise, or a biofarm or whatever it happens to be, that will allow us the same opportunities to create those tens of thousands of jobs, high-paying jobs that keep Nassau County the Nassau County that we know it is.
Energy.
Energy, extraordinarily important.
Because without energy, nothing happens. As you know, it's the backbone of any kind of economic activity or economic development. What are your thoughts on energy issues that we have? Energy independence, solar, obviously, hasn't really picked up very much, which is supposed to. LIPA rebates are going down, therefore there's not much of an activity.
Well, when a new business thinks about opening here on Long Island, or a business from out of state decides to relocate and come here to Long Island specifically, those are the challenges. It's property taxes, it's cost of living, it's energy. And so let's understand that energy is a critically important issue for us. And it all comes down to the infrastructure that we have in place. We are on an island. We produce our own energy here in plants. For the most part, these are plants that are still burning fossil fuels. They've converted to gas, to natural gas. But you're right. Solar is still a very small percentage of the overall energy production on Long Island. We haven't really explored wind, and we should. We need to. We have to look for alternative energies. We're surrounded by water. So we have the opportunity through the kinetic energy of waves to be able to produce energy as well, and we haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
You know, we're still relying on the same fossil fuels that have, you know, that were powering these power plants 100 years ago.
Right.
So it is our responsibility to create the platform for that next generation. You know, we need to remember that generations behind us or before us, they built subways in New York City.
Right.
Right. They built the Long Island Railroad. They built Grand Central. They built the Penn Station. These are the things that we take for granted today, but without which New York City wouldn't be New York City.
Right.
There are 2 billion rides on the New York City subway system every year. Those people would not be able to get around but for the forethought of somebody who built that, and they built that over 100 years ago.
Wow.
And we're living on the benefit of their forethought today.
Right.
Do we not have a responsibility to do the same for future generations? And you know, we have a surplus in New York State. We have the benefit of billions of dollars, literally, of settlement monies that are coming in. You know, by some estimates, up to $5 billion that are coming in. How we invest that money is going to be very interesting. And again, I understand that we can't, shouldn't, and won't invest it operationally. But we do have to invest in infrastructure. And so whether we rebuild roads and bridges, which is important, we also should think to invest in making ourselves energy sufficient and self-sufficient, especially here on the island, living as we do on an island. So you know, we should explore those other means, and we should try and harness as much as we can the energy that we have around us, whether it's solar, wind, or wave and kinetic energy. We have the ability to do that. The science exists. We have Brookhaven National Lab right here on Long Island that is exploring and doing phenomenal things in the sciences when it comes to renewable energies. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the viability of the metropolitan area and Long Island specifically as a region to do better at providing energy sufficiency.
Gas. It says that, you know, I mean, U.S. has plenty of gas, but it's way under.
It is well underground and sometimes very difficult to get to.
Right.
They have tons of gas, huge deposits of gas locked in shale formations. You think we should go down there and get it?
See, that's
the question.
That's the question.
Here's the answer. You know, I don't think our science has frankly gotten there yet.
Okay.
We have, and that should be the challenge to our scientific community, because when we have, as a society, challenged our scientists to get us to the moon, when we have challenged our scientists to explore the solar system, when we've challenged our scientists to explore the deepest reaches of the ocean, they have met those challenges. And having reached the moon and explored the solar system and reached the deepest depths of the oceans, I find it incredible that we have yet to be able to come up with a means of being able to safely extract natural gas from shale formations. It's a real concern.
We have a way to go.
There are environmental concerns. And when our science finally catches up, where we can do it safely, and if we can do it safely, then we should do it. Here's the concern. We rush in, we go in there, they call it hydrofracking.
Yes.
We go in there and we explore for these natural gas deposits because people say it's going to create jobs and create economic opportunities. And then they destroy the land. They leave a toxic mess. And then how much money are we going to have to spend to clean it up? And the money that they had made and taken and left is going now to be a requirement of us taxpayers and the rest of the state to have to go there and clean up. And it's going to take 100 years. So, you know what? The gas is there. It's not going anywhere. When we're ready to be able to take it out, and we can guarantee everyone that we can do it without destroying our environment, that's when we can do it. To do so beforehand, for the sake of just some greedy people who want to make millions of dollars at the expense of future generations who are going to have to clean up their mess, I think is wrong.
Okay, so we're not ready yet.
I don't think we're ready yet.
Okay. Welcome back to Interviews That Matter. I'm your host, Raj Mehta. We're having a conversation with Senator Martins. Senator, welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about the campaign this year, right? You're running in November again for the third term.
I am running for re-election.
And you have an opponent who has been unsuccessful, ran in a primary for the county exec last year. Now he's running against you.
Sure.
What are the major differences that you see between you and him?
Well, I think it's one of experience. Frankly, I think as a small business owner, a person who has not only owned a business, employed people, had to make payroll. I think you learn perspective from having to do that.
Right.
I think that my perspective on having successfully managed a municipality and been the mayor of a municipality, as well as my 2 terms in the Senate, sort of speak for themselves. We've gotten a lot of things done. We've been successful in ways that that I think I would hope people would recognize as being positive, and would encourage them to continue to support me in my efforts to continue to bring stability and hopefully some long-term forethought to New York State policies.
What do you see the challenge for the campaign?
The challenge for the campaign is the same challenge in every campaign.
Okay.
It's always about messaging. It's about telling people who you are. And frankly, I've been here for 4 years.
Right.
That relationship that I have with my constituents, I think has been developed over those last 4 years. But as we know, in the middle of a campaign, it's about messaging, it's about campaigning, it's about sometimes exaggerating the truth and or out and out lying. We have to be careful about that. So I tell people all the time, and I'll mention it to you. When you receive a piece of literature at home and you're hearing something,
right,
take it with a big grain of salt. Hefty piece of skepticism about what you're receiving, because if you hadn't heard about it before, maybe it didn't exist. If the papers haven't talked to you about it, and if you didn't know it existed, but now you're hearing it for the first time, especially for someone who's been in office for a number of terms,
right.
You know what? Take it with a grain of salt. I wish we had the opportunity to be much more forthright in our campaigns, and I wish there were limits to what we can say or what our opponents can say about us. But the reality is, in this society, it's up to each side to be able to campaign as they see fit. And if my opponent wants to spread, lies, I can't stop them from doing that. I go out there and just tell people the positive stuff that we've done, the things that I'm proud of, and remind them that we've been there with them every step of the way. And they've responded real well.
Your record says that anyway.
Exactly. And that's really the positive thing. That's what we should focus on as elected officials as we go into campaigns.
Right.
I think oftentimes, and I tell my colleagues who are Democrats this often, and they agree, there's more that unites us than separates us. We all want the same things. We may want to get there in different ways, but as a fundamental issue, we all want the same things.
Right.
All the things you and I just spoke about, they're not
the
Republican
end of the
things or
day,
Democrat things. At the end of the day, we want to be safe in our homes.
Right.
We want to have opportunities for ourselves, opportunities for our children, make sure that they're well educated, make sure that they have every chance to succeed in life. And that's not a Republican or Democrat thing. I think that, again, we can all agree those are things we should all strive for.
Right, right. Senator, I can never forget this statement by you, that if I remember it correct, that when you said it first time, that we should never forget where we come from, but we should never forget where we are today.
Well, that's true. And I remember that.
You remember that?
I do remember us having that
Right.
conversation.
Right.
You know, look, as you know, my parents immigrated from Portugal, and
Right.
you know, my association or my cultural underpinnings are an important part of who we are, who I am. You know, so it was always a priority for my mom and dad that we have that we learn the language, that we understand the culture, that we visited the country. My grandparents, when I was growing up, were still there. They've since passed, but I do still have family in Portugal, and we do visit. But I think it's important because you can't know where you're going until you know where you've come from.
Right.
And you know, our roots are humble roots. You know, in my family, it's you know, we're one generation removed from a small farming village in northern Portugal. My grandparents were farmers. My parents were farmers before they came over to the United States, and my dad started the construction business, and mom, when they first came over, was a seamstress. You know, working in a factory, and you know, eventually the business did well enough where mom was able to stop working to help raise my brothers and sisters and I. You know, those are important things. They stick with you, but they also teach you priorities, work ethic. You know, the importance of not taking anything for granted,
Right.
and you know, the reality. And we spoke about this earlier. You know, the reality of what an incredible country this is. That opportunities are available to anyone who's willing to work hard, dedicate themselves, and it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter who your parents were, who your grandparents were. You can succeed in anything in this country, and your only limitations are yourself. I think that's an incredible thing. So you know, the opportunity to realize where you came from is only an indication of where you can be.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. Now, viewers of our show is from South Asia, and you know, in your district there are a lot of viewers from
Yes.
South Asia.
Yeah,
I mean,
an incredibly
Right.
diverse
Right.
community, an incredibly interesting community. You know, I find that our South Asian community to be entrepreneurial,
Right.
you know, hardworking, successful because of their hard work and dedication. We also have a very large number of doctors,
Yes.
of medical doctors and people in the medical profession,
Yes.
who have done quite well here and transitioned very well. But I find a community that is of recent immigration, that has committed themselves, made the investments in their local communities, put a priority on education for their children, and you can see the success story one after the other, not only in terms of the first generation, but wow, when you look at the second generation, you know, these kids that are coming through school, that are going to college, the sky is the limit. And
Yes.
you know, I don't think that happens again by accident. It
Right.
doesn't just happen because the kids come over. There's a priority on family, there's a priority on discipline, there's a priority on education, and there's a priority on not taking anything for granted. And so when you put all of those things together, as we have here on Long Island, and certainly in the South Asian community, it is no wonder that we have the success stories that we have.
Thank you. Yeah. So, you know, we believe in family values, and we believe in education. We believe whatever exactly what we believe in.
Sure. And
Yeah,
and
so-
you also believe, and because I've heard it time and time again, the government isn't the answer.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, government isn't
Yeah.
the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is right here in your own two hands,
Right.
and you set your own
Right.
future and your own fortune based on your own hard work and your dedication. And so oftentimes we have to look at ways where government is acting at cross purposes, and we have to walk away from that. And so if there's a challenge that I have as we move forward, and I made it recently to a gathering of the South Asian community that I was at, let's talk about those things. Let's talk about it from the standpoint of not just when we get together every year. Let's talk about it from the standpoint of let's put together focus groups and round tables, and let's talk about entrepreneurs and people who have been successful in the sciences or the technical aspects, or in medicine, or in development, or in construction, or whatever the industry happens to be. but let's have those discussions so that we can try and help influence public policy as well.
Good. Yeah. Senator, your final message.
My
to the
final
community.
message is, as always, it's great to be here. It's always great to spend some time with you and share some of our some of our thoughts
Yep.
and some of our vision. I am grateful for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to a final 6 weeks of this election cycle. Hopefully, success on November 4th, where I can continue to serve the people of my district.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, comments, you can email me at rajamitv@gmail.com. That's again rajamitv@gmail.com. You can watch our prior shows on YouTube at youtube.com/Infosys International. That's again youtube.com/Infosys International. Until next time, have a great week. Thank you.
Great to see you.